Hi everyone, my name is Christy Michelle. I'm the Child Support and Education Worker here at Rural Response for Healthy Children. I'm excited to be here today and have all you joining me to learn about self-regulation. So we created this presentation for families, caregivers, and even some school educators. We're hoping to help you learn and understand about what is self-regulation and how we can use some of the tools to help our children, whether it's at home or in the community or at school. So Rural Response often starts every presentation with a land acknowledgement. This is one way that we can demonstrate our commitment to the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. And we know, however, that this is not the end of our responsibility in working towards reconciliation. Rural Response for Healthy Children acknowledges that the geographic area we support is located on the traditional lands of the Ojibwa Chippewa of the Anishinaabe group of Indigenous peoples. Huron County is on territory that is covered by Crown Treaty number 29, known as the Huron Tract Purchase of 1827. As a community, we have the responsibility for the stewardship of the land on which we live and work. We recognize and deeply appreciate the Indigenous historic connection to this place and the agreement with the Crown of Canada to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. So today, we thought the learning outcomes are hoping to help you have a better understanding of self-regulation and to also gain practical strategies that support self-regulation. An overview of the presentation, we're going to be talking and defining self-regulation and the importance and significance of it, ways to support self-regulation as caregivers, and then model a few activities for you. So let's start off by talking a little bit and going deeper into what is self-regulation. So self-regulation can be defined in various ways, but in the most basic sense, it involves controlling one's behavior, emotions, and thoughts in the pursuit of long-term goals. So more specifically, emotional self-regulation refers to the ability to manage disruptive emotions and impulses. So the ability to adapt our physical and emotional energy and outthinking and social skills when we need to. That is research from Hoffman, and it also involves sensory processing, executive functioning, and emotional regulation. So why is self-regulation so important? We know that within the last decade that research has indicated that the lack of self-regulation early in a child's life has broad-reaching consequences, could be both medical and psychological. And this information is from Stuart Shanker. These studies show that children with the ability to self-regulate are more successful in schools and in life. So when a child can self-regulate, they're able to identify and manage their emotions. They are able to control their impulses, and they can make thoughtful and conscious decisions. And they may also be able to set goals and achieve them. So I'm going to show you one of my favorite phrases here. And it says, there's no such thing as a bad child. So children often have a different way of responding to their stress. So you might know some children who get physically ill. Some get nervous, anxious, they become hyperactive. Some don't sleep very good, whereas other children want to sleep all the time. What all these children have in common when they misbehave is that way of becoming a pattern of response. So what's different about each of these is how we as the caregiver react to that response. So seeing a child suffer brings out the nurturing side of us as caregivers, except to the child who's responding to his distress by becoming angry or aggressive. So they're often the ones that are seen as the problem child. They're the ones that are being yelled at. They're maybe being punished more often. And sometimes as caregivers, we forget to stop and ask, why are they doing what they're doing? And why now? So we're going to watch a video And Dr. Stuart Shanker is the guru of self-reg, and he is here to provide us with a clear answer to what is self-reg. And then he's going to go deeper into 5 of the domains of self-reg. And it's a 7-minute long video, and then we will break down each domain and learn about them more deeply. So I'm going to push play, and we'll listen to Dr. Stuart Shanker talk about self-reg.
Self-reg, we now define as a very powerful method for understanding stress and managing energy levels. And of course, those two variables, those two sides of the equation, are really saying one and the same thing, because that's what stress is. Stress, by definition, is anything that requires our internal systems to burn energy in order to maintain some sort of internal balance. These are very new ideas, and when you first read about it, it seems fairly straightforward, makes perfect sense. Then when you start to go into it a little, you find that stress is actually much more complex. It's a much more complex phenomenon than we had really understood before. And so we break stress down into 5 domains. And those 5 domains are the physical, emotion, cognitive, social, and prosocial. And then to add just a bit more complexity, we show how, in fact, you're never just dealing with a stress from a domain. Stresses bounce around and they impact each other. And you're really always dealing with all 5 domains. And so we have to understand the various connections, and we have to understand, to make even a bit more complicated, we have to understand the difference between obvious stress, what we call overt stress, and hidden stress, things that burn energy. And then just recently, we've started to emphasize the distinction between negative stress and positive stress. Because, of course, there are all kinds of positive stresses that we need our children exposed to. A positive stress is a stress that burns energy, but in the process promotes growth. It might be creates more energy than it burns. So an awful lot of distinctions. And to guide you through this, self-reg takes us through 5 basic steps. The first step is, we call it reframing. And what that means is we need to recognize stress behaviors for what they are. Understand the difference between stress behavior and misbehavior. Understand the signs of stress behavior. Understand them in ourselves as much as in a child or a teen. Recognizing the very idiosyncratic nature of these signs. What's a sign for one child may not be for another. So all of this is involved in reframing. And as you'll see as we go through this, it gets a little bit more complicated as we begin to break down what we understand in self-reg by something called mindfulness. We can break that down into 5 categories too, becoming mindful of the kinds of assumptions and biases that we have that cloud our perception or skew our perception of why children or teens behave the way they do, and becoming mindful of internal states and so on. So an awful lot of work will go into that first step, that reframing step. Then the next step is identifying the stresses, recognizing what the stresses are. And as I've just mentioned, this is, it can be remarkably, it can be very difficult, but remarkably rewarding as we start to understand how things that we thought were totally innocuous are in fact stresses. I remember once being asked by a parent, why is it that my child has an absolute meltdown every Christmas? And in fact, we know that Christmas is a huge stress in all sorts of ways. And even getting a present or a number of presents is a stress for a child, which is very interesting when you start to understand we are why we are seeing these meltdowns or whatever. The third step is to reduce the stress. So if we go back to the Christmas example, there are so many obvious ways that we can begin to take this theoretical knowledge and really apply it in ways that not only help our children, do the kinds of things we want them to do, be happy and healthy and behave, but really turn things like Christmas into the joyous event or occasion that it should be, and that it can easily be if we understand and reduce stress. So we look at ways that we can, in the moment, apply these strategies, and that leads us to our fourth step. And our fourth step is becoming stress aware, recognizing when we are overstressed. It's quite remarkable how in the modern age I talk about a generation that careens from one stress to another. And quite often we do it quite intentionally as we inadvertently raise our stress levels by seeking out highly stimulating activities to keep the adrenaline going. So we work on developing stress awareness in ourselves and, of course, in our child or teen, in order for them to practice self-reg. They must learn what it truly feels like to be calm, what it feels like when they are starting to become agitated. And then the fifth and final step is developing strategies that promote restoration and resilience. And as we've been emphasizing throughout today, these strategies have to be unique to each individual child or family. There is no one size fits all. And I talk about this as, think about it, this is not like going to a department store and buying a suit off the rack. This is like going to Jermyn Street in London and buying a custom tailored suit. So we have to figure out how do we custom tailor the self-reg strategies that will work for my child or for my family or for myself. And so that's what self-reg is.
Okay, so I'm going to show you this little video here, visual. And these are the 5 domains that Dr. Stuart Shanker talked to us about. So we're going to jump into those individually and just really break them down about what is stress. And we know that by definition, it's anything that requires our internal system to burn energy in order to maintain some sort of an internal balance. So we're going to look at all 5, and here are the domains. So our first one that he talked about was the biological. So this is how we respond to stimuli at the biological level. And number 2 is your emotional. So how we deal with our strong feelings. Cognitive is how we process, store, and retrieve information. Number 4 is social, how we understand and respond to social cues. And then our last, number 5, is prosocial, how we demonstrate positive skills like empathy. So we're going to take some time and go over each domain and break it down to talk about a couple examples. So let's look at our biological domain stressors. So for our children, this might be noises, loud noises, crowds, being amongst too many people, too much visualization stimulation, not enough exercise or movement, lack of sleep, and junk food. So all of these biological stressors affects the level of energy in our nervous system. And you may be able to think of a couple more that fall under this biological domain. And then if we go into our emotion domain, strong emotions that are positive, which could be you're overexcited, or it could be the negative emotion that's angry or fear. So in this one, children might have a hard time with new situations, and these children will have lack of self-confidence and they maybe have a lack of desire to persevere. They have difficulty with situations that might include embarrassment or anything that comes challenging to them. They have a hard time with, and that causes stress. And then again, we're going to move to our cognitive domain stressors. And children with this stress has difficulty processing certain kinds of information. So they find it really hard to focus as well as to switch focus. Children who have cognitive domain stressors, they tend to have a fixed mindset opposed to a growth mindset. They might have a hard time understanding cause and effect. They find it hard to take action when required. And they might have a hard time seeing someone else's views or opinions or perspectives. Moving on to the social domain stressors, difficulty picking up on social cues, difficulty understanding effect of behavior on others, and they have a hard time or a difficult time recovering from and repairing breakdowns in interactions with others. So they may respond inappropriately to others' feelings and emotions, both verbally and non-verbally. They might have a harder time understanding humor. They can only rely on ridicule when they're trying to be funny. And they may have a hard time compromising. Sorry, I jumped ahead here. So now we're on to the pro-social domain. Difficulty coping with other people's stress. They have a sense of injustice, such as misinterpreting stress behavior as misbehavior, and they do not display much empathy. So children will have a hard time co-regulating with others. They can be dishonest with themselves and others, and they find it difficult to put the needs of others ahead of their own. So there we have our 5 stressors. And now we're going to talk about the different types of stress that Dr. Stuart Shanker mentioned. The 2 that he talked about, there's 4, but the 2 that come to my mind when we want to kind of go into detail about is the overt. So the overt stress is the ones that are really obvious to us. So you can look and visually see them. So it might be somebody screaming, it could be a car crash, it could be hitting, it could be yelling. So when a child displays these actions, they have an overt stress. So now a hidden stress are those stressors that are hard to identify, and they give us the quick energy, and then it's like an energy burst at the beginning, but then it ends up depleting energy in the long run. So a really great example for us caregivers is coffee. So you get that initial boost of energy, and then you hit the crash. A couple other examples of hidden stress could be TV, drugs, and alcohol. Negative stress, this is the stress that depletes the energy and it reserves but does not improve our lives. Whereas positive stress, it burns energy, but it promotes growth. So a couple of examples of a positive stress in a caregiver's life could be going to a job interview, or it could be going to the gym to exercise. So those are the types of stress that we want to be aware of and look out for. So now I want everyone to think about this. We know when our children and our youth in our lives are stressed that they're not ready to learn. But what about us? Parents, grandparents, school staff? We know that we've all been stressed to the max at some time in our lives. But what stresses do you bring to your work or just into your life in general? So think about a time that you were stressed and try to break down, was it a biological stress? Was it an emotional stress? Was it cognitive? I'll let you think about that. And sitting here, I'm actually thinking of a really great example of a time where I know myself, as I'm a busy mom of 3 children, I think about my morning routine. So getting all my kids out the door on a specific time, I feel like there's that time crunch. And then all of a sudden, one of my daughters tells me she didn't do her homework. So I can start to feel that stress coming on. And then I go to pick up my coffee and it spills. So there's another added stress. And then I get into my car and I hear a humming noise. So all these stresses are coming into my body, my nervous system. And now I want you to think about the next step. How do I not enter my day at work feeling stressed? Even though these are a bunch of little tiny things that are happening, it's affecting my body. So can you think about what stressors you identify in yourself? In order to do that, we need to understand self-regulation with the role of our brain. So we know that our brain is designed to keep our body in balance. Our body craves homeostasis, and the brain supports adaptive functioning, and it's hardwired to protect us. And why is all this information important? Self-reg looks at these different kinds of whys. So why is this happening? And we're going to talk about it through a metaphor that Paul MacLean has come up with, and it's called the triune brain. And this is his idea that the human brain is composed of 3 different neural systems. So at the bottom, you'll see on our graph there is the reptilian brain. And this is like an ancient system that takes over when we are threatened. And in self-reg, we want to refer to this as the brown brain. Okay, so above that sits our red brain, and this is the limbic system, where all of our strong emotions and our feelings and our urges are triggered in the limbic system. So all sorts of communicative and social mechanisms operate through the limbic system. So then if we move to the top, this is where the neocortex is, and we call that our blue brain. So our blue brain that's what makes it possible for us to think, plan, learn, speak, be aware of everybody, and just have that self-awareness. So we're going to talk about the red brain and the blue brain a little bit more closely. So the calmer we are, the more the blue brain is in control. So that's what we want to see happening. But the greater the stress is, the red brain takes over. So then when we have an emergency situation, so whether it's real or imagined, the brown brain is in total command. So that brown brain now has taken over. And when we talk about losing control and the red brain taking over, that's when our body goes into fight, flight, or freeze. So now we're going to go into our stress response and how this is a survival system. So stress behavior is caused by too high of a stress load. And the big challenge in doing self-reg is figuring out why the child's stress is so high. So when our red brain is turned on, some of the things that happen are adrenaline, heart rate, breathing, and blood pressure get turned on and get high. We get sweat glands, the endorphins are running, we become hypervigilant, we might have higher alertness and reactivity. So we're kind of on edge, we're on alarm. We call this the alarm brain. And then when we want to look at the stress response with our blue brain as our survival system, and when this is turned off, the digestion is turned off, our immune system, our cellular repair, our prefrontal cortex, and our hearing, which is actually all the muscles of our inner ear, they constrict to not be able to hear that human voice. So we want to make sure our blue brain is on, and then our red brain stays calm. So lots of information to take in here today, but I can tell you, neither comprehension or learning can take place in an atmosphere of anxiety. And that's by Rose Kennedy. So I thought that fits very nicely when we're talking about our red brain and our blue brain, because when our red brain is turned on, our children can't learn. They don't have that safe place to be in. So what is the importance and significance of that safe space? To learn, children need to feel safe. So when students don't feel safe, the fight or flight center of the brain fires up. So students then become survivors versus learners. And that's why it's so important to try to keep that red brain turned off. And when we look at our stress behavior and our misbehavior, we're going to talk about the blue brain and the red brain. So let's start with misbehavior. So that's when our blue brain is running the show. And we know that kids can act out, and that's misbehavior. So when our blue brain is still moving and running the show, we know that that student or that child, they probably could have acted a little bit differently. They're also very aware that they've done something. So they're able to respond to you and let you know what they have done and why they shouldn't have done that. So they are very capable of acting different when they misbehave. So your blue brain is still on, there's no danger, there's no stress response happening with our emotional stress, our cognitive stress, or all those domains. But then all of a sudden, we have stress behavior. And that's when our limbic system takes over, which is the red brain. And there now, the red brain is running the show, and our children are not fully aware of what they are doing. They don't know why they are doing what they're doing, and they have limited capacity to act differently. And that's when we say that our children are in fight, flight, or freeze. So never in the history of calming down has anyone ever calmed down by being told to calm down. So I like this cartoon because it's telling us that our red brain, when it takes over, as a caregiver, we tell our children to calm down, it's something that they can't do. But one way and one tool to help a child to calm down as a caregiver, you can co-regulate. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to co-regulate. So we can simplify the language, make it short, simple. You can slow down your movement. You can match the child's effect. You can modulate your tone of voice. Listen with your ears and your eyes. And maybe wait for that child to initiate. And then join together with the child in their intent. Co-regulation is when two individuals are in sync with each other. You're allowing each individual to up or down regulate to the other by being calm and engaged. So as a caregiver, by understanding what someone is thinking, by reading all those cues and gestures, you can figure out what that other individual need is. One more little cartoon for us. I'm learning how to relax, doctor, but I want to relax better and faster. I want to be on the cutting edge of relaxation. So to me, this tells me that red brain is alarmed, stress response is high. So how do you self-regulate? So if everyone is willing to take a moment to think of things you do in a typical day to self-regulate yourself in order to function and interact in a positive way. And then in what domains do you require the most self-regulation? I know for myself, I can share that I work on my cognitive domain quite often. And when we identify what our cognitive domain stressor is, it talked about having a growth and a fixed mindset. And I know I focus on that on a regular basis. So we're going to show you a couple quick and easy tools to help self-regulate our children. They're very easy to do. The first one I want to show you, it's called a lazy 8 breathing. So basically you just make the number 8, but it's all about your breath in and that exhale out. So you always just start at the top And you can go down and make the number 8 as a visual. And when you take that breath in, so your first top of the 8 is your breath in. And then when you come down is when you exhale out. Come back in with your child and teach them how to make the number 8 with a breath in. And then the last one is a breath out. There are so many different breathing tools that you can practice. And just remember, the most important piece is that long exhale out. And then a second tool I want to show all of you that you could try with your children is working on that self-confidence piece and that mindset to help change their thoughts. So one of the tools is called a 4-finger affirmation. So the first step in doing that is having your child pick a couple positive statements. They can be simple and easy, or they can be lengthened into a certain goal. So the 4 that I choose today is: I am enough. Today is going to be a good day. I deserve to be happy. I believe in myself. So I've picked my 4 affirmations. And now we have our children use their fingertips with their thumbs, and each sentence goes with a finger. And then we repeat them in hopes that if we do this every day, we can change our fixed mindset into a growth mindset. So I am enough. Today is going to be a great day. I deserve to be happy. I believe in myself. And then we repeat that, and we teach our students or children to practice this on a daily basis. So moving forward as a caregiver, I want to work on transmitting calm, not dysregulation. Practice borrowing the calm of others. And remember to see misbehavior. And then think about the stress behavior and the differences, and recognize that they are different. And remember, self-reg is not a process, or it's not a program, it is a process. Recognize when you are calm, and then also recognize when you are dysregulated. And then lastly, think like a researcher. Why this? Why now? So Stuart Shanker's elements of self-regulation is: when feeling calm, focused, and alert, you have the ability to know that one is calm and alert. When someone is stressed, it's the ability to recognize what is causing the stress. The ability to recognize stressors both within and outside the classroom environment. The desire to deal with those stressors. The ability to develop strategies for dealing with those stressors. And the ability to recover efficiently and effectively from dealing with stressors. So lots of work here that you could practice in order to help with that self-regulation. And some of the reflective questions to ask yourself: what can I do to support children learning how to self-regulate? What can you change in the environment to reduce children's stress levels? How can you support children in recognizing when they are under or overstimulated? And how can I help children recognize activities that help them become calm, focused, and alert? Now, when I put into thought all of these ideas and elements of self-regulation, I have come up with a couple examples and ideas. So for myself and for my children, we look at movement, nature, positive self-talk, art, nutrition, sleep, music, mindfulness, achievement, animals. And I'm sure that you can come up with a list of many more. And our final thoughts for today: use anything that is helpful to children and allows them to experience calm, pleasure, joy, balance, and relief. And Stuart Shanker said it very nicely. It's not a one size fits all. So every child is uniquely different when it comes to their stressors and finding ways to self-regulate. So I want to thank everyone for joining me today in learning about self-regulation. And I believe Katie is going to take over any questions or comments and any more information that you need. And I want to thank everyone for joining. Bye.